Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I'm going to be doing my 14.13 top lane tier list. So if you enjoy the content, like, subscribe, and let's get into it. So if there were a couple of changes this patch, not hugely impactful. Most of them were elite skewed or just quality of life changes to try and help some champions out. Top of this is the 3-week patch, so it is going to be slightly longer. I'll probably make some more content, whether that is first pick top lane tier lists or maybe some elite skewed tier lists, as I tend to traditionally target mine towards fairly average audiences. I don't want to purely have it elite, as it just ends up being very limited in how people can use it. So let's get into the changes. To begin with, the D tier is still going to consist of relatively similar champions. Yasuo still underperforming. Obviously, the removal of lethal tempo has hurt him quite a bit there. Gangplank still here. The changes were nice. They do help. Just not hugely impactful. Obviously, Gangplank tends to be on the weak side anyway. This champion is very hard to play, very elite skewed. But yeah, the changes, we're trying to target pushing him more towards pro play again. Obviously, Gangplank has completely fallen out of pro play at this point. But what the problem is there is that the bruiser system just isn't particularly supportive of Gangplank anymore. Trinity Force tends to be the only item he really wants to poach from that. Sterek, Shojin just aren't really there for him at the moment. However, what has slowly crept up has lethality items like the Opportunity, the Yomu's variants seem to be doing a bit better at the moment. Definitely worth looking into if you can find some if you can find some hybrid bruiser lethality options or crit lethality later on into your build, then there is definitely strength there. However, he's going to stay within the D tier for the moment. Lee Sin got buffed this patch, not enough to really revive lane Lee Sin. He's massively underperforming at the moment. These changes, although they do help, just not really enough for him. Viego, obviously better in the mid lane if you're playing him for a lane. He can still function in the top lane, but you have to be very proficient at him. He's easier to pilot than something like the Lee Sin, but still just not particularly good. You're better off playing him in the jungle or within the mid lane. K'Sante, obviously very pro bound. You're not playing this champion in low elo or even, low average or even high elo. This pick tends to still underperform. For the moment, he is going to stay within the D tier. And Akali got over nerfed in 14.11. 14.12. It was a swing. Obviously, they want her to be slightly weaker for the average player. She was overperforming for the average player within mid lane. Still was on the weaker side for top lane, but yeah, now very much underperforming in the D tier. Someone requested that Rengar got added back, and he is within my C tier. He is easier to pilot within the top lane, but he is still very demanding of your skill. He is primarily played by OTPs. I wouldn't really recommend playing Rengar. However, there are variants. Obviously, Electrocute got buffed for laning, so that does help if you opt into that. However, Fleet, Grasp were a bit more standard. There are some bruiser variants, but like your crit lethality still tends to be pretty much your core. Essence Reaver being changed is definitely hard. That you can't really go that variant anymore, but there are builds there. But for the moment, he stays within the C tier. On top of this, Varus received a plethora of changes this patch. It's hard to tell where he really lands at the moment. There's a lot of builds going around. Like you got your Kraken Slayers, your Borks, your Nash's Tooths. It's looking like Kraken Slayer does seem to be performing quite well. I've tried the Bork variant. That did feel quite good. However, Varus still prohibited by the fact that he's a bit more short of range. Into a lot of the burst at the moment, it can be quite painful unless you are very much ahead of the curve and you're opting to things like Terminus Jack Show, where you can kind of withstand a lot of that and then output enough damage to burst people down in response. He's fine at the moment, but it is worth trying to refine the builds, and yeah, you might find a bit more success. For the moment, I'm going to leave him within the C tier. Sejuani has started popping up a bit more. Her play rate in solo queue hasn't really risen a huge amount, but I've seen a lot of discussion around the pick. Obviously, it started to see some presence in pro play, which makes sense as like a flex option. Her burst, obviously, very deceptive. Like, it's pretty good. Her ER combos with like the W can give her a lot of upfront damage. Alongside this, though, you tend to want a lot of resources if you want to be useful within the game. Obviously, they've really pushed for a solid health ratio on that W now. It doesn't work as well within solo queue. Obviously, you tend to want to, as Sejuani, you want to give away resources when you also want them to like scale your damage. It's quite a frustrating place to be in at the moment. If she was a bit more aggressively skewed towards her ratios, then I could definitely see this pick really working if you are very greedy with your gold. However, it kind of lingers in the middle at the moment. There are some like Liandry, Rylai variants which just don't perform to the same level as just standard tank. I would really recommend just playing standard tank. Ignite, TP, you have options in like Mana Flow Scorches, Secondary, and you can be quite abusive in lane. I'm going to leave her in the C tier for the moment, but you can definitely have success on this pick if you are proficient and you're willing to learn it. Smolder is also within my C tier. Obviously, this pick has maintained a play rate within the top lane. He's not too bad these days. If you can stack up, you're playing around like your mid to late game, you can definitely have a lot of strength there. Obviously, Essence Reaver tends to not be as good these days. I believe you are mostly going Trinity. I actually don't remember. I've been playing Smolder. I don't get why I can't remember. So, you know, Essence... Okay, no, they buffed his crit ratio to support the Essence Reaver variant, as Trinity just wasn't finding that level of success. However, Trinity is still an option. That is definitely something you can opt into. Alongside that, you still really do value Shojin. You're not really going like your April hybrid variants, like your Leandri Riftmaker, like before. Yeah, you just traditional marksman stuff, and you should be good to go. The pick's a solid C tier option. There are better ranged picks within the top lane. Rammus, great into heavy AD compositions. If you can't get your hands on Malphite, maybe the champion's banned, maybe you're into a really bad matchup for the pick, then Rammus is an option here. I wouldn't really recommend blinding it, only use it as a counter pick, but it's not great. It still struggles. He's going to sit within the C tier for the moment. Jace, incredibly pro and elite bound champion. That's not going to change anytime soon. He will stay in the C tier, and he's a solid C tier option. Like, if you put the time in, you put the games in, you can definitely find success on this pick. Obviously, if you blind it and you're leaving the likes of Malphite open, you can be really punished if you're not like really proficient at the champion. There are lots of weaknesses to the pick, and yeah, if you fall behind the curve, you can feel really useless. C tier for the moment. Olaf, there have been talks around like a Zeke's build where you're opting into the item to really stick to people with your ultimate. Doesn't really have the play rate supported at the moment. Also, just isn't as successful as just like your standard core bruiser. He really took a hit with all the nerfs and the ghost nerf. Yeah, he stays within the seat at the moment. Obviously, he's still really good into tanks where you can really just stick to them and like punish the fact that they can't CC you. Udyr doesn't really perform that well in solo queue. I mean, that's no surprise. The pick is very much pro bound, but even then, it's kind of fallen out of pro play at this point. He's in the C tier for the moment. He struggles with his itemization after Leandri. Like, you tend to want a tank core, but then it just doesn't really feel that great in its current state. So yeah, he's within the C tier for the moment. Nah. Not a bad champion. The buffs not too long ago did help him. However, he still struggles. You're still very much reliant on precision in your harass early on into the game. If you fall behind, you are very squishy. You will be punished for it. However, if you do stay ahead of the curve, you pick up your Trinity, your Sterix, stuff like that, then yeah, you can definitely find success on this pick. He's a solid C tier pick. Honestly, Jason, once again, pretty hard champions to play, but if you do, then yeah, you can definitely find success on them. Yone, going to be my C tier. I saw some discourse around Yone in the comment section of my last video. The pick, obviously, tends to perform really well when you are very proficient at the pick, but the hit the hit of losing lethal tempo has definitely hurt the champion. There have been some optimizations which people did need to do, like running Legend Haste for a patch did tank his win rate. Alacrity, of course, is always going to be better there. Fleet should be your core. Like, running Fleet over Conks and PTA, definitely something you should look into. On top of this, there are variations. Like, you do have your Borg. Your Kraken Slayer doesn't tend to perform as well, but Borg primarily still a solid option. There are builds which can function on this champion. He's not as bad as some people think he is. He's not as good as some people think he is. He's a solid C tier pick. If you put the games in, you can find success on the champion, like you should with a lot of these harder to pilot picks. Moving on to the B... Oh, wait, no, I've realised that there's a champion completely missing here. Skarner is in the D tier now. They absolutely killed Skarner this patch. Taking 5% maximum health damage off of the Q, combined with a nerf to his Q mana cost, has really hurt the champion. It's primarily, obviously, lane-focused. Has hit him in the jungle as well. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe they do a hotfix buff, as it is the 3-week patch, but for the moment, he's in the D tier. I would recommend avoiding this champion unless you're really, really comfortable on the pick, and the damage maybe doesn't affect you as much, but it generalistically is a massive hit and going to drop him all the way down to the C tier, the D tier. Moving on to the B tier, we have Briar. back by popular demand. I get people always talking about Briar in my comment sections, and oftentimes I just forget to add her on. She's not a particularly popular top laner, but she can function here. She is not bad. She definitely has some strengths, obviously. Very low elo skewed. Do not pick this champion. Probably up of like Emerald Plus, you are going to begin to get punished. It's obvious how the champion plays out. It's very telegraphed. Obviously, the W is a autopilot run at enemy mechanic. If someone understands this, then oftentimes they can manipulate it, play around it. She's a B tier option. Goes up the higher, the lower elo you go. Goes down the higher elo you are. A Twisted Fate is probably deserving of a C tier spot. Honestly, I've not been a fan of Twisted Fate in solo queue for like the average player for a while now. Even before his last set of nerfs, this pick was traditionally kind of bait. Obviously, people are now talking about it being a bit more of a bait pick, being relatively hard to pilot. If you're not ahead of the curve, you can really be punished. I think low B tier is a good spot for him. If you pilot the pick well, you can still find success. If you can't pilot the pick, don't suddenly pick it up. It's not really worth it at this point. He's a high C, low B tier option. Akshan has been removed. I'm not going to put Akshan on the top lane tier. His play rate's basically being crippled at this point. They just took too many swings at him. Like, he was already declining in pick rate. And obviously, he does overperform. Like, that was something he was finding. Like, he probably sits within the B tier for the most part. But, yeah, the play rate's just not there anymore. Like, he's unpopular. He's, like, half as popular as, like, Neferi, who I've just added on this patch. There is really not a huge amount of data to really promote this pick at the moment. I would like to see them try and tweak him to, like, make him so he's a bit more viable in low and, like, average, so the average player can kind of pick him up and have some success. But he's incredibly elite bound. Obviously, you only really see success on this pick, Masters Plus. And yeah, I'm going to remove him. He would be B tier, but yeah, he's been removed now. Vladimir, they bug fixed him this patch. It didn't really do anything. He probably still sits within the B tier. It's really hard to tell. Like, it on paper was a pretty big bug fix. Like, something to do with his W not calculating the correct ratio. But yeah, it didn't really do anything. He stays within the B tier for the moment. If you're once again proficient at the pick, you're picking up your Rabadons early on into the game, then yeah, you can find success. But he's a B tier champion at the moment. Aurelia, pilot driven. Like, if you can pilot Aurelia well, you can still find success on this pick. She's still very much like a high A S tier pick. If you can't pilot Aurelia well, just don't bother. Like, it will tank your LP. Put the games in, put the practice in. Same goes for Riven, same goes for Fiora, same goes for Camille to a degree. And then yeah, these picks will find, like, they are gradual champion, like, picks you'll find gradual success on as you obtain champion mastery. 1,000 games kind of thing. Same goes for like Lee Sin, stuff like that. But alright, going to be on my B tier for the moment. Silas is also my B tier, primarily just a counter pick to Malphite. You don't really see Silas outside of that. Obviously, Electrocute got buff for laning, does definitely help this pick, but yeah, not really being played outside of that. Ryze, still one of my underrated picks of the top lane. Was Azir last season. Azir top was really good for a while until they absolutely gutted that champion because of pro play. Ryze, still a really solid pick, mid and top. Like, I really do think this champion is underrated in its current state. Darius, not a bad pick, but definitely did get hit by Ghost being nerfed. He's solid B, a high B tier option. Aatrox, there are some refinements in the build which have been found. So, we are looking at Sundered Sky, Sterek, Shojin, and then the new item, which has completely escaped my mind in terms of what it's called. But yeah, Aatrox definitely looking more towards Bruiser variants. He's finding a lot more success on them. Lot more success on them at the moment. Jesus Christ, I can't speak. However, Profane Hydra is still an option if you are looking for a bit more assassin and a bit more burst capability. It's not terrible. It's just not as default as the Bruiser variants. Yeah, Overlord's Blood Mail is the item I'm looking for. Definitely a solid option for item 4-5. But yeah, Aatrox, solid B tier pick. Probably deserving of like a high B tier spot. Quinn, also not doing too bad. There have been some build variations. Obviously, Electrocute, PTA tend to be pretty standard for burst. Fleet is a bit more safer. Obviously, you're not going to be as threatening. If you're running like your Electrocute, you tend to go to Scorch. Symbiotic Souls seem to be a bit of a pickup at the moment. On top of this, we have seen some like Yomu's, Kraken variants. Quinn's just a very unpopular champion. If you're looking for a lane bully, there are better alternatives, but if you enjoy playing Quinn, go ahead, learn the builds, and you should still find success on this pick. She's like a mid B tier option, and I'm pretty sure they're just happy leaving her there. Vayne tends to be a bit more elite skewed. Obviously, that is just how lane bullies go. If you can pilot picks well and you can like be very oppressive within lane, not feeding to like enemy jungle who will obviously look to punish you throughout the game. Yeah, there's a lot more skill to it. Vayne obviously was really safe previously with like how powerful Ghost was. Fleet being a bit stronger, combined with like Storm Razor variants, which gave her movement speed. She's a bit more punishing now, but she's still very good at what she does. If you're looking for a lane bully who can definitely have some like 1v9 potential in team fights, maybe not to the same degree as old Vayne, but still has decent burst if like you're going down your Qmax variant, which tends to be a bit more traditional at this point, then yeah, you can still find success in this pick. Still a solid B tier option. Sam just tends to be pretty heavily counterable. There's still definitely strength to this champion. If you do like manage to resist laning phase, he's very hard to kill mid to late game. Obviously, the last set of buffs were to try and push him back towards being a bit stronger as a juggernaut later on into the game. Does have some build variations. Obviously, you can opt into AD items like your Titanic, your Sterix, your Overlord's Bloodmail, but tank tends to be a bit more traditional and a bit more stronger as like a default option. Rumble, very elite skewed champion, great lane bully. I really like Rumble as a pick. I think he definitely has a lot of strengths. People will obviously get very frustrated at this champion. It feels very oppressive to play against. Oftentimes, lane bullies will get a bit more, are just more frustrating, will eat more ban rate. That is just how it goes. If you feel like a champion is being really oppressive against you, you'll probably ban it more. Kayle doesn't absorb a lot of ban rate for that reason. But yeah, Rumble, very good elite skewed pick, but can perform well in average play. Solid B tier option. Riven, once again, kind of akin to Aurelia. I'll put them next to each other. If you can pilot the pick well, she can find success. If you can't pilot the pick well, don't bother. You will lose the LP. It's once again another one of those 1,000 game champions. If you put the time in, you will be rewarded for it. Cho'Gath, fairly generic tank option, kind of akin to Sion, honestly. His problem is he's just pretty telegraphed, and like with the mobility creep and just the amount of movement options within the game at the moment, he just doesn't have the same level of strengths. Like you won't really see this champion outside of Diamond Plus. But you can definitely still find success on this pick. Obviously, if you're going like your Emax, it tends to be a bit more just standard and like your trading patterns. You're running your Grasp, you're running your Heart still. You'll do a decent amount of damage. You have relatively good burst with your ultimate. He's a solid B tier pick. Trundle, honestly, could probably get dropped down to the C tier. He's such an easy champion for how easy he is. He really doesn't find the success he should. But then his ease of play kind of like enables him to stay within the B tier. There are definitely like things you can like do on this champion, like your Ravenous, your Hullbreaker, your Trinity tends to be pretty core. Gives you a lot of split push potential if you can get Void Grubs. He's a pretty clear win con champion, and yeah, he can stay within the B tier for the moment. Moving on to the A tier, so Neferi is going to be the first champion here. Neferi is, well, okay, so Neferi in the past was a solid top laner. She obviously had a massive decline in play rate as she got nerfed since her release. They then obviously more recently have buffed the champion back up, and she's still a solid top laner. Like, she was never really terrible, she was just unpopular. Mid lane Neferi, obviously flying high at the moment, doing really well. Top lane Neferi, although it's got a very limited play rate, there's definitely some strength here. Once again, she's low elo skewed. She's a stat checky assassin, scales pretty well, has a point and click ability. If the enemy knows how to play against Neferi, and oftentimes it can be a bit more punishing, you want to ban things like Aurelia if you blind this pick, but she's a solid A tier option. Singed finds a bit more success at the moment on some of the, I've seen some like Warmog's variants of Singed, alongside like running Grasp. That seems to be where some of his strength lies. On top of this, you do have like Phase Rush variants, your Conqueror, still pretty standard. It does look like Violet, Leandri do tend to outperform as early options, but Warmog's is there. Deadman's Riftmaker, later items can still work to relative success, and Singed is a solid A tier pick. Wukong, if you can get your 2-item spike, this champion's still really good. I say it all the time, but yeah, Wukong incredibly item spike dependent champion. 2 items tends to be where he spikes the best. you're running like either TP or Ignite, and I'd recommend TP traditionally if you're just looking to be able to get to that spike. Ignite if you know you have kill threat on your laner. Camille, obviously, all the talk at the moment. This pick has been very popular in Elite play at the moment. They did end up nerfing her because she was overperforming there. She's now back down to like a solid A tier option. Obviously, the pick really benefits from like knowledge of matchup, knowledge of champion, and she's still great at what she does. She's a single target pick potential champion. If you are able to solidify getting onto a carry and you have a good lane matchup, then yeah, you can still find a huge amount of success with this champion. She also still has great split push potential. Kennen got nerfed this patch. 611 health went down to 580. Didn't really do too much. It was almost like it was overnight where Kennen went from being like an underrated champion to an overrated champion. It was really funny actually. Like we began seeing Kennen in pro play just randomly, like with like the Leandri variants. Like people were like, oh my god, this champion's all like ever like he's really good. And then people realized that this champion isn't as good and doesn't really find the level of success they were hoping for. He's still fine. Like he's still a solid A tier option. If you can like exert lane pressure and you can be oppressive early on into the game, you're picking up things like your proto belt and you're just being useful around the map with your ultimate, then you can still find success on this pick. But he's not Exodia. He's solid AP lane bully alongside Rumble, I guess. Tryndamere obviously got nerfed pretty heavily. He was massively overperforming. He was like the best pick on 14.11. Got nerfed at 14.12. He's still a fine champion, 14.13. Ravenous still tends to be pretty cool on this champion. It makes it very hard to move this pick out of lane. He's a good A tier pick. Nasus, really underrated as a champion. You could definitely find a lot of success on this pick ever since his buffs. There have been some Emax variants. Don't go it as default, but like pick it in lanes where you know you really can't do anything early on, into things like Rumble or ranged matchups where you can like abuse something like Airy, Comet, or Phase Rush. And you kind of just play around like EWE, slam E's on the wave, get your CS early, stack later on into the game if you go like a hybrid variant. But yeah, you tend to just primarily go like Blackfire Torch and like AP, and you should still find success on this pick. A solid A tier champion. Mordekaiser obviously has received a lot of adjustments as of recent. He's still good though. This pick definitely has lost power over time. They do tend to just take a bit out of him every so often. Obviously, the ultimate change has made him a lot more frustrating to play against. It definitely amped his ban rate a bit. They also tried to push him to being a bit more stronger in early game, as opposed to being so much of a mid to late game. However, he was never really that great in late game. It just tended to be very telegraphed, which did give him a lot of low elo skew. But yeah, now they've definitely pushed a lot of his power to early game, early mid as well. He's still a solid A tier pick. Lowy, if you can like find the right matchups for this pick, you tend to just use her as a counter pick, and she can be really oppressive in those instances. If you blind Lowy, you will get counter picked by something like a Mordekaiser, and it can be very hard to play the game. She's in a fine spot at the moment. There have been some Cyclosword variations, but it just isn't finding the level of success as some of her other builds. Iceborne, Sundered Sky tend to be a bit more standard. She's a solid A tier pick. Pantheon received a 10 damage buff to minions and monsters on his W this patch. It didn't do anything. It wasn't expected to. It's a nice quality of life change, which, is good. Pantheon, obviously, still a good pick. I really do think this champion's underrated in his current state. Make sure you're QW maxing rather than QEW. Picking up things like Eclipse and Cleaver tends to be a bit more standard at the moment. Obviously, they gave him some more health ratios, so it really does help when you are going things like Cleaver into like tankier options, into tankier picks. On top of this, things like Shojin, Steric, Overlord's Bloodmail as a later item all work quite nicely. Pantheon, good A tier pick. Ornn tends to just be a very solid generic go-to tank pick. If you ban Fiora, you can find decent amount of success on this champion. It's hard to move him out of lane. Obviously, you do give up a lot of control on the game. He doesn't have great carry potential. You're a bit more reliant on other people. I wouldn't really recommend playing Ornn as a default pick unless you're really uncomfortable on carries. Then he can be something you can opt into. But yeah, you just don't have the level of agency that I'd really recommend picking for a solo queue champion. Gregor's got nerfed this patch. Didn't really do anything. Kind of put him from like mid A tier to like low A tier. Obviously, Gragas tends to be a pretty elite skewed lane holder. You can still find success in mid elo. Obviously, you're looking at like your Roa Archangels builds, and he's still a fine champion. He's a solid A tier pick. Jux, a great counter pick option as well. Great into like your ranged picks where he can really abuse counter strike value, but you can still find picks into most generic matchups. Obviously, his E is a very oppressive ability. He doesn't scale as well as he has done in the past. He tends to be a bit more mid game skewed, but if you're running things like Fleet and then you're running Demolish, you can be oppressive on side lanes. He has solid team fight potential. He's a good A tier pick. Gwen, once again, also kind of like a counter pick option, primarily used against tanks, where you can really abuse your true damage and maximum health damage. Yeah, not really being played outside of that, but she's a solid A tier pick in those spaces. Heimerdinger, underrated champion. I really do think Heimerdinger should be getting played a lot more. Obviously, he's going to be unpopular, but it's just by nature of the champion. But Blackfire Torch, Rylai, Liandry are all really good items on him. He can still opt into things like Zonya, Rabadon, and the pick's in a good spot at the moment. A good A tier option. Malphite is your generic go-to anti-AD option. You can't really blind him, but he's a great counter pick into heavy AD compositions. Obviously, the AP junglers, which were kind of thriving last patch, did hurt him. He was pretty bad into them. When AP junglers are less popular, Malphite really thrives when it is like an top AD jungler situation. He does benefit this patch. But yeah, he's like a high A tier pick for this reason. Teemo, great counter pick into Camille. That is primarily what you're going to see him as, but he's still just generically a good scaling option in the top lane. Has strength early on as a lane bully, but yeah, it can translate into late game power with your shrooms, your zone control, and he's a solid A tier option. Fiora, also a counter pick. A lot of these are counter picks. Like this string of champions here, all very good counter pick options. Fiora, not something I'd really recommend picking up unless you have put the games in before as a counter pick option. But if you do, pick her into the likes of Ornn. You should have a field day. It's really hard for Ornn to pilot that matchup. There are other good matchups for Fiora, but yeah, she's primarily good in that one. And yeah, good counter pick if you put the games in. Solid A tier champion. Shen, really good pick. Actually, I think Shen probably deserves a spot in the S tier at this point. I'm really tempted to move him up, but like a lot of people do troll with his build variations. You should really go depending on the game state rather than just defaulting on one every game. If you are defaulting on one, try to default on something with a bit more carry potential, like your Titanic Hydra or your Heartsteel. Sunfires and Hollow Radiance are good if you're looking for a bit more wave clear, but they aren't as good default options. Supportive Shen tends to only really be good if you are like you can give someone else full carry agency and then they can take over the game. That would be items like Locket, Redemption, Nightstar. Shen in a great spot at the moment, probably deserves a spot in the S tier, but I'm gonna leave him as a high A tier until people probably correctly refine his builds. Yeah, then he can move up. Colored Warwick tend to be a bit more cheese OTP picks. You don't tend to see them outside of that. But both these picks aren't bad in their current states. Warwick obviously got buffed towards the end of the last split. Khaled just generically pretty strong at the moment. Profane Hydra tends to work quite nicely on him. However, he does have some like Eclipse and Bruiser variants, which you can still find success on. Both of them solid A tier picks. Moving on to the S tier. Actually, I'm going to swap Shen and Urgot around. Urgot has definitely fallen out of favour as of more recent. He's obviously stronger and low elo. He does scale pretty well. He's pretty stat checky, not too hard to pilot. If you can toggle correctly, then you can definitely find a lot more success and really push yourself into Diamond and Masters with it. But for the moment, he does struggle a bit more into some of the ranged options, into some of the AP options, so I'll drop him down to the A tier. Cassiopeia, great top lane. Cassiopeia is an incredibly underrated pick, has been for so long. Her kiting power, her being like a good AP option, the build variants she can provide, not so much variants, but like build options later on she still has access to are still really good. You're primarily stuck to like a Roa Archangel's core. There are some Blackfire Torch users, like people who use that, but yeah, if you're looking for core Roa Archangels, you can flex around, but she's a great S tier option, has been for a while now. Poppy, great counter pick into high mobility champions, but just as a top laner, she's really good. She's durable, she has great team fighting with her ultimate, she can really shut down a lot of comps, and very deserving of an S tier spot. Tom Kench, this is still Wizard Frog, please go it. Like, it's just so good in its current state. Your heart's still into your Heartsteel, Riftmaker, Protobout, Rabadon, Flex option. Usually you have a Dark Seal last slot. And then obviously Swifties are your core boots. He is in a great spot at the moment. I really recommend learning it. You probably could get free LP out of it up until like Diamond. It's just that strong in its current state. Volibear, still a great top laner. With the Flicker Blades build, he is still finding a lot of success. Roar, Flicker Blades, and then you tend to be able to flex around a bit more, but that's just standard core. Great S tier pick. Yorick, like one of the best low elo champions in the game. Obviously, it's really hard to play against Maiden when you don't fully understand it. This champion does fall off like Emerald Plus. Well, maybe you can. I mean, you can function Emerald. Like Diamond Plus, I think is a probably more suitable bracket to like say where he falls off. But yeah, beneath that, you can go like your lethality variants, you can go your bruiser variants, and you can find relatively equal amounts of success. He's a great S tier pick, a great low elo stomper. Same goes for Mundo, also a great low elo stomper. He does once again get punished Diamond Plus, where people are more willing to like contest you on the wave. But he does spike incredibly hard at level 16 and like full Heartsteel completion when you're able to start proccing it. And yeah, there's just loads of power in this pick once he gets going. If you can kind of deny that, then he does definitely fall down the tier list, but you're not going to get as heavily contested in low elo, so he stays within the S tier. Did I not have Renekton last week on my tier list? Oh no, I did. I just managed to skip him. Renekton is in the A tier. I ended up missing him, but he is fine in his current state. He has begun to see a bit more pro play. Doesn't seem to be finding the level of success that I hoped he would, but yeah, there are still bruiser variants which can find a decent amount of success. Eclipse, if you're snowballing, I'd recommend skipping it. If you're not, he's a solid A tier pick. And then we have former champions here. So Kill is still punishable early on into the game. Don't get me wrong, like you are still going to struggle against a lot of matchups. If you're able to get like those free scaling tank matchups, then definitely do take them if you enjoy this champion or you're good at playing it. Outside of that, don't really blind pick Kale. You'll get counterpicked by the likes of Nasus, and there are loads of bullies which can kind of shut you down and then punish you mid. Obviously not so much later on where you can actually like scale and be useful in the game, but like Nasha's Nasha, Rabadon tends to be pretty core, Kale, and then you can kind of flex around there. Like there's some Shadow Flame, some Lichbane variants. Void stuff isn't as necessary. Obviously some of her damage profile is AD, and then like yeah, Zonya, stuff like that can all work on her. She's a good low S tier pick if you find the correct matchups. Set and Garen are my other two champions in the S tier. Honestly, Garen probably deserves an S plus spot. I'm actually going to put, I'll just fill out the remaining picks. I'm going to explain them why. So Set, obviously finding a lot of power this season with a lot of the builds being really good on him. Well, I mean, having a really good core build, which you basically go default every game. Obviously, this is your Stridebreaker, your Sterek, Stridebreaker, Hullbreaker, Sterek, Overlord's Bloodmail, Flex option. I believe that tends to be pretty cool and set at the moment. I believe Cleaver, Sundered Sky can work as like last slot options as well. But yeah, his build's really good at the moment. You can find success on Bork. Like Bork used to be troll on set. It's not so much anymore. Like if you enter really heavy health stackers and you don't really value the sort of Stridebreaker as much, then that is something you can definitely opt into. Stridebreaker is default. Yeah, Hullbreaker, Sterek, Overlord's Bloodmail. Both these can flex around as like third, fourth slot options. And then last slot, Cleaver, Sundered Sky. And yeah, you're good to go. This pick is a really good S tier champion at the moment. And then S plus, Garen and Zac. So Zac got nerfed this patch. Well, nerf quotation marks. He ended up relatively power neutral, if anything, power positive. Some of the nerfs this patch have kind of outweighed it. Obviously, Scanner being nerfed has definitely helped. But the changes just didn't really provide the level of nerf that we're hoping for. He does end up being buffed at certain threshold points as well. So yeah, Zac, S plus champion. And then Garen just deserves his spot here. He's been really performing quite well for a while now. Obviously, has always been crowned like the low elo stomper, but he works well in mid elo and doesn't fall off anywhere near as aggressively in high elo as a lot of people consider him to. The build tends to be pretty cool of Stridebreaker, Zerkers, Phantom Dancer, Deadmans. You can flex around like your last two slots, whether that's like a Sterix or a Fawn. Or IE if you're looking to do a bit more damage, and then you can opt into Zephyr. Obviously it's like a boot capstone upgrade. He's in a great spot at the moment. Conks Phase Rush, primarily Conks I would recommend, but yeah, a great pick in the current state of the game. Both these champions very deserving of S+ spots. But this is probably what the meta is going to look like for the upcoming, 3-week patch. If you're looking for good low elo picks, then yes, your Mundos, your Yoriks, Kale is like a counter pick option, are going to find success. If you're looking for something a bit more supportive, Shen is definitely an option there. If you're looking for just generic carry Bruiser Juggernauts, then Set, Garen, even obviously Mundo can kind of fall into that bracket. Volley Bear is a bit of a hybrid AP bruiser. And yeah, those are really good picks at the moment. So those are my thoughts. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.